Over the last few years, one of the most fascinating shifts I've seen is how women have started to truly embrace their own self-sufficiency. It's not just about earning money or having a job anymore. It's about creating a life that feels whole, meaningful, and deeply fulfilling without having to rely on anyone else to complete it. And because of this, the old dynamic of needing a man for security, for status, or even for basic companionship is disappearing fast. Women are asking themselves, if I can build this life on my own, why should I tolerate anything less than extraordinary when it comes to love? And that question has changed everything. For generations, women were conditioned to see marriage and relationships as the ultimate form of security. The man was the provider, the protector, the center of stability. But now, women are their own providers, their own protectors, their own sources of stability. They have built careers that not only sustain them, but allow them to thrive. They can buy their own homes, travel where they want, invest in their passions, and create communities of support around them that don't depend on a romantic partner. This independence has created a new level of confidence that changes the way they look at men. No longer is it about finding someone to take care of them. It's about finding someone who can add to a life that's already rich and rewarding. And here's where the shift becomes uncomfortable for a lot of men. For years, many men assumed that being able to provide financially was enough. They thought that as long as they had a decent job or could put a roof over someone's head, that would earn them respect, loyalty, and love. But that's not the reality anymore. Women don't need rescuing, and they're not impressed by the bare minimum. If a man doesn't bring emotional intelligence, genuine effort, kindness, and consistency, he's simply not needed. The role of a partner has evolved from provider to collaborator, from protector to equal. And that's a role that not every man has learned how to step into. Women are also discovering that being single doesn't mean being lonely. It means being free to explore, to grow, to invest in themselves without compromise. In 2025, more women than ever before are saying, I would rather be single than settle. That's a sentence that terrifies men who are used to being chosen just because they showed up. Women are no longer handing out commitment as a reward for basic presence. They're selective, they're intentional, and they're willing to walk away if the relationship doesn't reflect the life they know they're capable of building alone. This rise in self-sufficiency has created a powerful ripple effect. It has forced women to raise their standards, but it has also forced them to reevaluate what they truly want. They've realized that love is not about survival anymore. It's about connection, growth, joy, and partnership. If a man comes into her life, he has to enhance it, not complicate it. He has to respect her independence rather than feel threatened by it. He has to celebrate her success rather than compete with it. He has to contribute to her peace rather than disrupt it. And if he can't do those things, she won't stay. So when we ask, why are women giving up on men in 2025? The first answer is clear. They're not actually giving up on men. They're giving up on the wrong men. They're giving up on relationships that cost them their identity, their energy, and their peace. They're giving up on men who still believe that being present is the same as being a partner. They're giving up on men who haven't realized that in this new world, love is no longer a necessity for women, it's a choice. And because it's a choice, the standard for earning it has never been higher. One of the most powerful changes we're witnessing today is the way women have raised their standards in relationships. This isn't about women suddenly becoming too picky or too demanding, as some people like to say. It's about realizing that for far too long, many of them accepted the bare minimum because that's all they thought they could ask for. A little attention here, an occasional text there, promises without follow-through, and the hope that if they gave more love, more patience, more understanding, eventually the man would rise to the occasion. But 2025 has brought a new wave of clarity. Women have stopped confusing effort with excuses, and they're no longer willing to wait around for potential that never becomes reality. What we're seeing now is a fundamental rejection of breadcrumbs, the late-night texts that don't turn into dates, the casual relationships that drag on without commitment, the "I'm not ready right now, but maybe someday" conversations. All of that is losing its power. Women are no longer mistaking inconsistency for romance. They've learned to see that someone who truly wants to be with you doesn't make you question where you stand, doesn't leave you hanging, doesn't show up when it's convenient and disappear when it's not. And because they've learned this, they're walking away much faster than ever before. This change is also fueled by the fact that women have more awareness of what healthy love looks like, whether it's through therapy, self-growth, or simply watching other people model better relationships. They've seen examples of what it feels like to be genuinely cared for. So when a man offers less than that, it's not impressive anymore. In fact, it's insulting. The old tricks that used to work, flattery without follow-up, charm without consistency, affection without depth, don't hold weight in a world where women know they deserve steady effort, respect, and emotional presence. Men who haven't kept up with this shift often feel blindsided. They'll say things like, "Women expect too much these days," or "It's impossible to make them happy." But the truth is, women don't expect perfection. They expect effort. They expect honesty. They expect the same level of energy they're willing to give. And when they don't get it, they no longer internalize it as a reflection of their worth. Instead, they see it for what it is, a man showing them he's not ready, not serious, or not capable of the kind of relationship they want. That shift in perspective has been a game changer. There's also a deep exhaustion at play. After years of being told to be patient, to lower their standards, to be grateful for whatever attention they get, women have decided that enough is enough. They're no longer interested in being someone's emotional crutch, part-time option, or backup plan. They've realized that settling for less than they deserve only delays the life and love they're truly seeking. And in that realization, they've gained the courage to say no, to end situations that don't fulfill them, to walk away without waiting for closure, and to prioritize their own peace over the fantasy of what a relationship could be if only he changed. The standards have changed not because women suddenly became cold or unreasonable, but because they finally learned to love themselves enough not to accept pain disguised as love. They've stopped romanticizing struggle. They've stopped glorifying sacrifice as proof of loyalty. They're no longer impressed by the effort a man makes in the first 2 weeks if it isn't sustained in the months and years that follow. They want consistency, they want emotional safety, they want to feel chosen every day. And if that's not on the table, they'd rather eat alone than starve in a relationship that offers crumbs. So when people say women are giving up on men, it's not entirely true. They're not giving up on love. They're giving up on the illusion of it. They're giving up on situations where they have to beg to be valued. They're giving up on hoping someone will change after years of the same behavior. They're giving up on being satisfied with less when they know more is possible. The raised standard isn't a wall meant to keep men out. It's an invitation for the right men to rise up. But for those who don't, women are finally okay with closing the door and never looking back. Another reason so many women are stepping back from relationships today is because of the confusion men are facing around modern masculinity. For decades, men were told their value came from being providers and protectors, but that script doesn't fit anymore. Women can now provide for themselves. They can protect their own lives, and they don't need a man to complete them. What they want instead is partnership, emotional connection, and a man who knows how to bring depth, consistency, and empathy into the relationship. But many men are caught between the old version of masculinity they grew up with and the new expectations of what it actually means to be a strong partner. That gap has created a tension that leaves women feeling unseen, unheard, and unsupported. The truth is, masculinity has always been in flux. But right now, the old rules are breaking down faster than ever, and not all men are keeping up. Some are still clinging to outdated ideas, believing that paying for dinner or showing up once in a while should be enough. Others feel defensive, saying things like, "Women don't appreciate good men anymore," when what they really mean is, "I don't know how to bring more than what I was taught." Women don't want to be in relationships where they feel like they're dragging someone into emotional maturity. They don't want to constantly explain why communication matters, why consistency matters, why showing up emotionally matters. They don't want to be teachers in love, they want equals. This struggle with modern masculinity isn't just about men failing to adapt. It's about how that failure impacts women emotionally. When a man shuts down instead of opening up, she feels isolated even while in a relationship. When a man refuses to grow because he sees growth as weakness, she feels like she's carrying the emotional load alone. When a man views her independence as a threat rather than a strength, she feels like she has to dim her light just to protect his ego. Over time, that kind of imbalance becomes exhausting. And in 2025, more women than ever are choosing to walk away from that exhaustion. Part of the problem is that many men were never taught that vulnerability is strength. They were told to be stoic, to be unemotional, to be tough. But what women want today isn't a wall. They want presence. They want someone who can say, "I don't have it all figured out, but I'm willing to grow with you." That kind of openness is what builds intimacy, trust, and a real sense of partnership. When men cling to the outdated version of masculinity, they end up offering surface-level roles instead of true connection. And women, who have invested deeply in their own self, growth, and healing, can see the difference instantly. It's not that women hate men or that they don't believe in relationships anymore. It's that they're tired of investing in men who refuse to evolve. They don't want to explain why respect matters, why reciprocity matters, why emotional safety matters. They don't want to be in relationships that feel more like raising a child than loving a partner. They want men who understand that masculinity today isn't about domination, control, or financial provision. It's about balance, support, and mutual growth. And here's the important part: women aren't saying men have to be perfect. They're not demanding flawless communication or endless vulnerability. They're simply asking for effort, for honesty, and for the willingness to grow. A man doesn't lose his masculinity when he admits he's wrong, when he opens up about his feelings, or when he celebrates his partner's strength. He actually becomes more attractive, more trustworthy, and more desirable because he shows he can hold space for her while being authentic himself. So, when we look at why women are giving up on men today, part of the answer is this: they're tired of waiting for men to catch up to the reality of modern relationships. They're tired of the disconnect between what men think is enough and what truly builds connection. They're tired of being made to feel like their standards are unreasonable just because those standards require growth. Women want men who can meet them where they are, who can embrace a masculinity that's not about power, but about partnership. And if a man can't do that, women are learning they're far better off walking away than shrinking themselves just to keep him comfortable. One of the biggest reasons women are walking away from relationships in 2025 is the deep exhaustion that comes from carrying unequal partnerships. For years, women were taught that part of loving someone meant fixing them, nurturing them, sacrificing for them, and making excuses for their lack of growth. They were told that being a good woman meant holding everything together, even when the relationship was breaking them apart. But that role of caretaker and fixer has worn them down. Too many women have realized that instead of being seen as equals, they've been treated as therapists, mothers, or emotional safety nets, while the men therewith contribute little in return. That imbalance has created a fatigue so overwhelming that many women now prefer to be alone rather than constantly drained. When a woman gives and gives without receiving the same energy back, she starts to feel invisible. She feels like no matter how much she pours into the relationship, it's never enough to inspire the man to step up. She ends up doing the emotional work, planning the future, keeping the relationship alive, while he coasts along thinking that her efforts will always cover for his lack of contribution. At first, she may convince herself this is temporary, that he'll eventually appreciate her, grow up, or recognize what she's doing. But eventually, the truth hits. Some men are perfectly comfortable in a dynamic where she gives more and they give less. And that realization is painful enough to spark change. This exhaustion isn't only about emotional labor, it's about the mental and physical toll too. Women are tired of managing their own responsibilities while also carrying the weight of someone else's immaturity. They're tired of being the ones to initiate difficult conversations, to remind their partners about priorities, to teach them how to be accountable. They're tired of chasing reciprocity that should come naturally in a healthy relationship. Over time, this constant one-sided effort feels less like love and more like a slow erosion of her energy, her joy, and her sense of self. In the past, women were often encouraged to stay anyway. They were told, all relationships are hard work, or be patient, he'll change. But that advice doesn't resonate anymore. Women have learned that hard work in a relationship should mean building something together, not dragging someone who refuses to move. And patience shouldn't mean sacrificing your peace indefinitely while waiting for someone else to grow. That shift in mindset is why so many women today no longer feel guilty about leaving. They've stopped confusing endurance with love. They've stopped mistaking struggle for proof of loyalty. What women are demanding now is balance. They want a partner who gives as much as they do, not someone who drains them. They want a relationship that feels like a team, not like a second job. They want to be cherished, supported, and uplifted, not taken for granted because they're capable of holding everything together. They want men who understand that true love isn't about leaning on someone endlessly. It's about standing beside them and sharing the load. And for men who dismiss this by saying women are too independent or too demanding, the reality is much simpler. Women don't need perfection. They need partnership. They don't need a man to do everything. They need a man who is willing to meet them halfway. They don't need someone who pretends to have all the answers. They need someone who shows up with effort and accountability. Without that, the relationship stops feeling like love and starts feeling like loneliness in disguise. So when we ask why women are giving up on men in 2025, part of the answer is this: they are exhausted from playing roles they never signed up for. They're done being the constant givers, the patient waiters, the silent supporters who sacrifice their own needs just to keep things together. They're realizing that love shouldn't cost them their energy, their peace, or their identity. And rather than staying in relationships that drain them, they're choosing freedom, peace, and self-respect. Because at the end of the day, being single might be challenging at times, but it's nowhere near as exhausting as carrying a relationship alone. Another powerful factor behind why women are walking away from men today is the influence of modern culture and social media. For the first time in history, women have constant access to examples of relationships outside their immediate circle. They can see what healthy love looks like, what red flags look like, and what genuine partnership actually feels like. They're no longer limited to comparing their relationships to the ones they grew up around or the ones in their small community. Every day, through platforms, videos, and stories, they're exposed to voices reminding them that they deserve more than inconsistency, silence, or neglect. And when you see evidence of better love everywhere, settling for less starts to feel impossible. In the past, Many women stayed in unhappy relationships because they didn't know another way. If every example around them showed women tolerating disrespect, carrying all the emotional weight, or sacrificing their dreams for a man, they believed that was just how relationships worked. But now, those old narratives are being challenged loudly. Social media is filled with conversations about boundaries, emotional availability, equality, and self-respect. Women are learning to name the behaviors they once endured in silence. They're being told that bare minimum is not enough and that a relationship should feel like support, not survival. That kind of education is reshaping the standards of millions of women who might otherwise have stayed stuck in outdated dynamics. But it's not just about the lessons. It's about the visibility of other choices. Women today are seeing people who leave toxic relationships and thrive. They see single women traveling, building businesses, raising children, and creating meaningful lives without partners who drain them. They're watching others model the reality that life doesn't end when a relationship does. In fact, it often begins. That visibility makes it harder for women to justify staying with men who bring chaos into their lives. If someone else can walk away and be happier, why can't they? On the flip side, social media has also exposed toxic behavior more clearly. Ghosting, love bombing, manipulation, and emotional unavailability are no longer mysteries. They're widely discussed patterns with names and explanations. Once a woman can identify what's happening to her, she can also recognize that it's not love, it's dysfunction. And once she sees it for what it is, she's much quicker to end it. The games men used to get away with, keeping women guessing, avoiding commitment, stringing them along, no longer work as easily in a world where women can go online and read 100 stories about the exact same behavior. Knowledge has stripped away the illusion. At the same time, modern culture has shifted the way women view independence. The narrative is no longer that a woman must be married by a certain age to be successful. There are endless examples of women choosing careers, passions, travel, and personal growth over rushing into relationships that don't serve them. That cultural validation has been liberating. Women no longer fear judgment in the same way they once did, because they can see countless others making the same empowered choices. And when independence is celebrated instead of shamed, walking away from an unfulfilling relationship becomes less terrifying and more natural. Of course, this shift has left some men feeling frustrated. They complain that women have been influenced by unrealistic expectations online, that they want too much or that they're chasing perfection. But women know better. They're not asking for perfection. They're asking for respect, effort, and emotional maturity. What modern culture has done is simply remove the excuses. It's harder for men to pretend that neglect is love when women can instantly compare it to healthier examples. It's harder to gaslight someone into believing they're asking for too much when there are millions of voices echoing the same standards. So when we ask why women are giving up on men in 2025, part of the answer lies in this global mirror. Women are no longer living in small, isolated bubbles where unhealthy dynamics go unchallenged. They're part of a cultural movement that celebrates walking away from anything that diminishes them. They're part of conversations that remind them they are worthy of reciprocity, consistency, and love that feels like safety. And because of that, they're no longer settling for chaos disguised as romance. They've seen what's possible and they're choosing to wait for it or create it for themselves, rather than waste time on men who don't know how to show up. At the heart of everything, the biggest reason women are giving up on men today is because they've started choosing peace over chaos. For too long, women were taught that love was supposed to be dramatic, that struggle was proof of passion, that if you truly cared about someone you would fight endlessly to make it work. But after years of living inside relationships that drained them emotionally and mentally, many women have woken up to a simple truth. Peace feels better than drama. Calm feels better than constant uncertainty. Clarity feels better than confusion. And if being with a man means sacrificing that peace, then it's not worth it. This shift is more than just preference. It's survival. Women are realizing the toll that toxic relationships take on their health. The sleepless nights spent waiting for texts that never come. The constant anxiety of wondering where they stand. The heartbreak of being taken for granted. Those aren't just emotional wounds. They affect the body, the mind, the spirit. And in 2025, women have reached a point where they're no longer willing to pay that price. They're saying, "I'd rather be single and at peace than partnered and in pain." That mindset is rewriting the rules of dating. The beauty of choosing peace is that it empowers women to redefine what love should feel like. It's not about intensity, it's about stability. It's not about chasing someone who keeps running. It's about walking side by side with someone who actually wants to be there. It's not about begging for attention. It's about naturally receiving it because the other person values you. Once women experience even a taste of that kind of peace, whether through being single through friendships or through seeing it in healthy couples, they stop tolerating anything that pulls them back into chaos. The irony is that men who bring chaos often don't even realize it. They think their inconsistency is exciting, that their unpredictability makes them more desirable, that withholding love keeps a woman chasing. But the truth is those games are losing power fast. Women don't see unpredictability as attractive anymore. They see it as immature. They don't see emotional withdrawal as strength. They see it as weakness. They don't see chaos as passion. They see it as a red flag. And instead of being hooked, they're walking away. Peace has become the new standard. Women are protecting their energy, their mental health, and their joy. They're saying no to men who bring drama, who thrive on arguments, who make them doubt themselves. They're saying yes to solitude, to personal growth, to relationships that feel safe and nourishing. And when you've built a life that already feels peaceful, why would you ever exchange that for constant stress? This is why so many women today are not afraid to end relationships the moment they feel chaotic. They trust that their peace is more valuable than any half-hearted love. And this doesn't mean women don't want relationships. They do. They still crave love, connection, intimacy, partnership. But the definition of what makes a relationship worth, it has changed. It's no longer about avoiding loneliness, it's about protecting wholeness. A man who disrupts her peace isn't a partner, he's a liability. A man who respects her peace, protects it, and contributes to it, on the other hand, becomes rare and precious. That's the kind of relationship women are willing to invest in, and until they find it, they're perfectly fine waiting alone. So when we ask why women are giving up on men in 2025, the final piece of the puzzle is clear. They're not giving up on love. They're giving up on chaos. They're not rejecting connection. They're rejecting confusion. They're not refusing to commit. They're refusing to compromise their peace. And that choice is one of the most powerful statements a woman can make, that her happiness is not negotiable, that her mental health is not a price she'll pay, and that her peace is far too valuable to lose for the sake of being with someone who doesn't know how to honor it.